Everybody knows we are recording now. We do have folks joining us on Teams, so we have a camera set up in the back. These are speakers and microphones, so they can hear us through those, and we'll hear them through those as well. So again, thank you. Welcome everybody for coming again. This is our third meeting on the property care ordinance. So everybody, we're seeing a lot of same faces coming back. I love that. We've got some new people joining us today. So I'm going to welcome everybody and let's do some introductions. So I'm Dan Folk. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Flagstaff. We're going to start over here with Duffy.
Duffy Westheimer, Raybon West Aspen.
That's
I'm Katie Mobarts. I live down here, so I need a number. What?
New rehab development, little corner house.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
The trapezoidal house. Mark Rose, neighborhood planner, heritage preservation officer.
Who's in the back?
Jordan Hollinger, Associate Planner, Conference Planning.
And then I think we have some folks on Teams. Do you want to read the names, Jordan, and then they can introduce themselves?
Sure, I'll just go down the list here. So Celia, you're first on my list.
I am Celia Barretts.
Thank you, Celia.
And then Dana or Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana Jolly. I live in University Heights.
Thank you for joining us, Dana.
And then Valeria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Valeria Chase. I have a joint position between the city and the university as a neighborhood liaison.
Great. Thank you for Valeria for joining us again. Do we have anyone else on Teams?
No, that's it.
All right. So just to kind of summarize again what we're doing here, so we've set up a series of these, what I'm calling working group meetings. And this is our third meeting. We do have an agenda we're going to stick to and go through some of the topics that we've identified for a property care ordinance. Some of you know the history. I'll do a real brief recap. So back in 2012, there was a group that prepared a property maintenance ordinance. And it's what I would call kind of an off-the-shelf maintenance ordinances. So there are PMOs that are published by code councils. We had one from the International Code Council. It was a pretty standard property maintenance ordinance that was presented to City Council. The council at that time decided not to adopt it. There was some follow-up in 2013 to focus on abandoned properties, so properties that were boarded up and again, basically abandoned. And so that, you know, we do have a number of things in our city code that address things like litter, the safety of buildings, parking of vehicles, nuisances we're going to talk about today, which are defined as abandoned buildings in our current code. And so one of the challenges is we came to we started going to the League of Neighborhood meetings, I think last fall. And just to back up, so City Council had a fair item, a future agenda item request. Council member Jamie Whelan at that time, who asked that we reconsider that, you know, staff look back at preparing a property maintenance ordinance. And so we did get direction from council to start this effort up again. And so it took us a little while to get going, but we started going to some League of Neighborhood meetings. And our first question was, should we just come back with what was attempted last time?
It seems like we're having some audio issues. I'm
Okay.
getting some notices that you have connectivity issues, so maybe we can ask everybody on Teams to turn their camera off. That might help.
So yeah, if you want to turn your camera and maybe silence your mic for now until you want to speak, if you're on Teams, that may help us with our connectivity. It's not showing me the Bluetooth signal anymore. Are they still on?
Yeah.
No, it is showing it now. Can you hear us? Celia, can you maybe just verify you can still hear us?
Yes, I can now. It was a little hard a few minutes ago, but I can hear you now.
Yeah, if you want to type comments into the chat at any time, Jordan is monitoring the Teams meeting. So if you want to speak, raise your hand through that raise hand function and put comments in the chat, and we'll communicate with you that way. And so again, just on a quick recap, the first decision was, should we come back with the same property maintenance ordinance, or should we try to do something different, right? And address maybe a wider range of issues, because there's so much going on right now with obviously housing, sustainability, heritage preservation. And so the direction we got early on was, let's try to do something unique for Flagstaff, right? And something that addresses what we wanted to address. And maybe not be so kind of intimidating. Those, off-the-shelf ordinances are very, they're written by attorneys and building officials. They're very comprehensive. They define everything. They're very thick usually. It can be very intimidating for somebody to pick up and read it and try to understand it. And so one of our goals is to try to create something that's, streamlined, easier to understand, and addresses really our priority issues, right? I think part of what got hung up on last time was this feeling that it was addressing too many issues, and it was more like something a HOA would do, right? And so again, trying to get the right fit to be successful. So that's what we're doing here. We've got this working group. This is the third meeting of 6 that we've scheduled through the end of July. We will continue to meet if we need to at the end of our last meeting in July. The goal is to have a draft ordinance to show council at a work session in September. And so they take a break during July and August. They come back at the end of August. So the goal is the first work session in September to have a draft ordinance. And then if they're happy with it, we take public input. That's a big public meeting. The direction is to proceed, then we would prepare that ordinance for their consideration, probably late September, early October. Hopefully before the elections. That's one of my goals, is to try to get the current council to consider this, because once we get a new council, sometimes it's like starting over, right? All right. Another thing, I'll promote the website. We just got that up on Monday. I sent it out again today. Hopefully everybody on this call is on our email distribution list. If you're not, I'll be sure to add everybody who's participating today. And so that website has all the information we've looked at all these meetings. It's got a lot of historical information, so things that were tried back in 2012. And then it's also got sections of our current city code that are relevant to this discussion. So I'm going to go over some ground rules. We're going to revisit the purpose and intent. I know I didn't put that on the agenda today, but we do have a revised purpose and intent statement that we're going to look at. I emailed it out this morning, and we've got hard copies of it here. So let's just review some ground rules. I think most of you have been in a lot of our neighborhood meetings. We want everyone to have the opportunity to participate. We want everyone to feel like they're being heard. And so we have some very basic rules. Let all participate. Turn off your phone if you've got it. If you need to take a call, you can step out. Assume positive intent, right? So let's assume we're all kind of working for the same positive goal and be open to listening to each other. We probably won't solve all of the things that come up today. Does anybody have anything they want to add to our ground rules? They're here in the room or on Teams. If not, let's move on to the review of the schedule and the meeting topics. The schedule has stayed the same. I have moved one of the topics due to scheduling. I had a schedule here. So today we're going to talk about attractive nuisances, property perimeter, and street frontages. On June 23rd, we're going to talk about building deterioration, abandoned and vacant buildings, vacant and undeveloped property. And then on the 14th of July, our goal is to have a kind of a complete document for this group to review, right? So everything we've heard on these topics over the last few meetings, we'll have that draft document and just see where we are. If there's other topics that we haven't touched on. And then on the 28th, we're going to talk about enforcement, code compliance, and implementation of this. We were going to do that on the 14th, but we had to switch it because of Reggie's schedule. And then at the end of the 28th, if we need more time, we'll schedule another meeting in August. So, all right. Any questions on the schedule? So I do want to go back and revisit the purpose and intent. I didn't put it on the agenda, but again, I see this as kind of a standing item. This is, again, this whole thing is a work in progress. We got some great edits last week from Celia Barrett, so thank you, Celia. And then I made a change, a suggested edit from what Celia provided. So usually what I do is I just start by reading this and seeing what we think of it. So the title of this property care ordinance, the chapter shall be known and may be cited as the property care ordinance of the city of Flagstaff, Arizona. Within this chapter, it may be known as the PCO. So the purpose of the property care ordinance is to protect the health, safety, and welfare by establishing minimum exterior maintenance standards for all residential and non-residential buildings, structures, and property and vacant land in the city to protect against hazardous, deteriorating, and other dangerous conditions. It is the intent of the city to work with property owners to preserve existing buildings and housing because an existing building is the most sustainable building. It is the intent of the city to mitigate the impacts of gentrification and displacement. And then implementation. The PCO shall be applied and enforced fairly and consistently. The city shall provide adequate notice to affected property owners to rectify the problems. And when feasible, the city will provide resources to assist property owners with compliance. And so really one of the important things about the intent and the purpose, I think, is again to kind of idea of what we do with a property care ordinance. Staff had added that language of how, sustainable practices and trying to mitigate impacts of gentrification. Again, thinking about this in a broader spectrum and, property maintenance ordinance should also be about preserving our existing housing stock, right? Our historic buildings, and not forcing people out of neighborhoods, right? One of the fears of property maintenance ordinances is that they've been used as weapons to displace folks who don't have the means to maintain their property. And I think that's a really legitimate concern. And so again, this is why we've written out this the way we have. And so I'll be open, again, thank you, Celia, for your edits. The one edit I made was, I did get rid of the word blight because blight is a word that has some baggage with it. Particularly with urban renewal. So urban renewal authorities in this country, it's a method of basically using tax increment financing to do redevelopment. And one of the findings for urban renewal is that your neighborhood is blighted or the property is blighted. And again, urban renewal doesn't have a good history, right? All these promises of creating jobs and reinvigorating neighborhoods. If you look at the history through the 60s and 70s, it was kind of used to displace poor folks, basically, folks in lower income neighborhoods, and replace them with things like baseball stadiums and civic centers. There are examples of success for urban renewal, but unfortunately, there's more examples where it probably didn't deliver what was promised. So that word blight does carry baggage. And so I recommend we not use the word blight because it is associated with urban renewal, and go back to deteriorating. And I'll open it up. I've been talking for about 10 minutes here. So any comments? Do we have an online comment?
Valeria just said that she likes it.
She likes it. Thank you, Valeria.
I'm-
Duffy.
I'm curious, if when you do this, you can to avoid gentrification with people who might not have the means to keep their property up to some of the funding mechanisms that have been available in the past. Is that something, to assist people?
Yes, it
Is
is.
that something you link to this?
It is, and it's a topic we talk about each time. So one of the goals of this program is to create resources to help property owners, right? So if we do have folks who don't have the means to paint their home, make structural repairs to the exterior, if they don't qualify for a grant, maybe a heritage preservation grant, council, when they directed us to look into this, they were supportive of creating funds to help property owners. So I do think along with, we'll try to create a program that can assist folks, and that's why we talk about putting them in touch with resources that may be able to assist. So it could be financial resources. I think that's really important to the screen. Jesse?
These resources, are they for owner occupied or anybody?
I don't think we've decided that. So, once you have money, you have to figure out kind of guidelines for the program, right? Who should qualify? Should there be qualifications? And what types of approvals are being covered by? Is the loan, those kind of things. Should there be a match? A lot A lot of times if you provide funds, there's a match required, just show a commitment and that it will get completed. So those are all those really important details. Yeah.
We have a new person also here, so why don't we?
Want to do some introductions? Welcome. We did introductions earlier.
Hi, my name is Joseph Koenig. Happy to be here.
Welcome, Joseph. Thank you for coming.
And then we have Michael Banker online.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Michael? Unmute.
Yeah.
and-
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I had a little trouble getting in. Michael Banker. I lived in Flagstaff about 4 years almost. Live over in Pinnacle Pines development over off of Lone Tree. And I'm really interested in this project. I drive down East Zuni Drive on my way to Safeway several times a week, and if anybody needs an example of why we need this ordinance, take a drive down that street and you'll see why we need this ordinance. So I'm happy to be here. Hope I can help.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. All right, so any other comments on the title, purpose, and intent as we've talked about it today? And again, as you take these materials, we want you to, this is very much a living document and a living process. So as you review these materials, we want you to feel free to email changes to me, come back to the next meeting with those changes, whatever is the most convenient for you.
So Dan,
Yes.
hi, it's Celia. I just wanted to say that I think at the end, we should come back and really review the purpose and intent again as a group. Because we may learn things through the process of discussing these various issues that we might want to incorporate into the purpose and intent.
Yes. No, that's a really good suggestion. We'll definitely, like I said, I'm going to keep it on the agenda for something to look at the beginning.
Okay.
So we'll definitely do that. And thank you again for all your work. It reads really well.
You're welcome.
Any other comments on this before we move on to the topics for today?
Can I just make? Hi, Dan, this is Dana Jolly. I'm looking at the notes that you attached from the meeting on May 26th.
Mm-hmm.
And at the back, you had a table of code compliance violation reporting for 2022 so far. And I guess I just need to make one comment. I've been pretty vocal for several years now, and I live in University Heights, about code non-compliance in the neighborhood, specifically about parking of RVs. And right now it's showing 0 complaints. And what I have to say to you is, somebody like me, I no longer complain because you're not enforcing the code as it's written. So why should I continue to complain? And I just want you to understand that you may have more learned helplessness on the part of property owners in dealing with compliance that we've just given up. And that's all I'm going to say.
No, thank you for that comment, Dana. That's a very fair comment. We have talked to city council about that section of the code. It is one we're working on. Again, it's an issue we get mixed feelings on it, right? Whether you should be able to park your RV in your driveway or not. Currently, the code doesn't allow you to park an RV or camper in your driveway. It does allow it in the street between April and November. But yeah, that's very fair. So the report, I understand what you're saying about not calling in notices about it anymore. So very fair. Duffy?
Thank
So
you.
to tag on to that, in terms of, they're showing up in the neighborhoods as a place to live or rent as a vacation rental.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then on intent B, it is the intent of the city to mitigate the impact of gentrification and displacement. How about discourage gentrification and displacement, or something along the lines of, because mitigate says we're happy with it happening, or we're okay with it happening. But it'd be nice if we could find a way to not.
Yeah. I've actually looked at that word mitigate myself and wondered, because yeah, mitigation is, yeah, how do you mitigate? Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. The intent of the city to discourage acts of gentrification.
Or discourage, in addition, discourage gentrification.
Yeah.
Because it's two different,
The impacts versus the actual.
and both I think should be addressed.
No, I hear what you're saying, yeah. And this is again, a very lofty, I think, aspiration, right? Gentrification is a really difficult problem, but to me, these are all tied together. Preserving housing stock, right, is the best way to kind of battle gentrification, pushing people off for units that aren't affordable for anybody.
I believe Celia has a comment.
Go ahead, Celia.
Yeah, I couldn't really hear what Duffy said, so if you could repeat that, I'd appreciate it.
Dan, unless you want me to try harder.
So Duffy's suggestion was to, in intent B, letter B, instead of the word mitigate, because mitigate kind of recognizes that it's happening and we're just trying to offset the impact of it. He's recommended the word discourage. And instead of even talking about the impacts, just say to discourage gentrification and displacement. Is that a fair summary? And the impacts.
So I think that's a great suggestion, and I've also been thinking that maybe we might want to add another sentence. I feel like that one sentence is really important, but we can elaborate. I don't know exactly what it might say, but some of the things you've just commented on, just to sort of fill in the blanks a little bit. So, because it's a very short sentence, but it's a very powerful sentence. So maybe the next review, we can talk a little bit about, or at some point down the line, what we might say in addition to discouraging gentrification. Because I don't have an answer to this yet.
It goes back to the zoning. Tax and gentrification are, it's what allows things that are compatible with. Right. Doesn't come up, as there are.
Yeah, that's why, you know, pretty care ordinance isn't gonna stop it. You know, that's why it's just one tool that maybe can encourage people to invest in the property rather than getting it to a point where nobody sees value in it and then they decide it's not worth fixing up, let's just scrape it. I think, you know, it's a tool that maybe will help slow it. Yeah, we have the issue of zoning and thinking zoning rights in there, so.
We're having some audio issues again.
Yeah.
You ask Michael to, or I can ask Michael, do you guys your camera off?
Michael, sometimes having cameras on slows down the ability, the transmission. So if you could turn your camera off, that might help with the connectivity issue we're having. Just so people know, on Teams, we don't have a monitor here. People can't see you on Teams. We've just got Jordan in the back looking at a laptop. All right, anything else on the person intent?
I think you might have had another comment.
Okay, do you have another comment, Sue?
Yeah, I couldn't hear Duffy's comment, the one she just made.
We're all laughing here. Beauty of hybrid meetings.
What was the second comment that she made?
About the zoning code and how really people have entitlements on their zoning rights.
Oh, yeah, how do I say this now? Zoning code has to be somewhat compatible with what's written here. What can be built might be income, what is allowed to be built might be income and encourage gentrification.
Did you get that?
It's a little garbled, so maybe you could repeat that for me, Dan?
I'm gonna have to repeat it. We were moving things around. We're multitasking here.
Celia, here's what I'm thinking is that sometimes gentrification happens because things are allowed that encourages people to leave. So zoning entitlements might make someone feel like they don't want to stay in their house anymore. So this kind of has to work with the code.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I would appreciate an example of that, Duffy.
Well, you have a single-story house, but the current zoning would allow 35 feet next door and more lot coverage.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that if someone bought property, they might not want to keep a 16-foot house. They might want to build a 3-story building, and it's
Got it.
allowed.
Got it.
If I live next to that, I might want to move.
If you could afford to.
Well, it starts to change the character of the neighborhood, right? We just had a meeting a couple weeks ago in La Plaza Vieja about looking at design guidelines or a character overlay for new construction and how that can fit in with the, historic pattern.
Well, we just had that happen in University Heights, Dan. A lot was bought on the corner across from us, and there's a 2-story house. The setbacks are completely different than the other homes in the neighborhood, and it looks, it's a nice house, but it looks completely out of place, compared to everything else that's been in the neighborhood since the 70s.
Right.
And so it just, I don't know, sets a bad tone.
Yeah.
But again, if I'm going to sell and go someplace, where am I going? I don't know.
Did you have a comment, Abel?
Yeah, I'm from Sunnyside. There's no place more than Sunnyside, maybe Southside for sure. But, we've gone from single family ownership in Sunnyside because it was the most affordable place anywhere in the Flagstaff area. And now people are buying just to put apartments in almost everywhere. And homeowners, it's true, it gentrified. They left.
Yeah.
So even the ones that were pure home ownership for primarily ethnic people, Blacks, Indians, and Mexicans, they're not there anymore. So it's being bought out just like, and being replaced with apartments almost anywhere you look in Sunnyside. And it's not a great look.
I have a question about that. So do you think that having a property maintenance ordinance would ever reduce the number of people that because of that?
Because I never wanted a property maintenance ordinance, never wanted, because, we've seen the effect, in places like Continental, or you read about it where something like you couldn't, a Marine veteran had an American flag and put up a Marine flag. They didn't let him put it. It makes you cringe. Okay, that's just one of many examples. And most of the people in Sunnyside don't want to have anything to do with those kinds of decisions. They liked exactly what was happening, that you could build a house out of World War II ammunition boxes and no one complain about it. Or side it with asphalt shingles, like was available in the late 40s and early 50s. But they stayed up until recently. By recently, within the last, it's been changing over the last 20 years. I don't know. Yeah, because there's been none of those organizations there and they still left. But part of it was, and longer answer than you were thinking, but part of what's happened is there's an overlay of zoning over there. And that overlay of zoning is causing some of the people to leave, because you can build a business right next to a nice house
Sure.
legally.
Much of Sunnyside is zoned commercial. People don't realize that. Even the residential areas are actually zoned commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, I have dual zoning on my 3 pieces of property. So people were wanting to buy my property all the time. And I said, okay, 1.1 million, hoping that they would not call again. They do.
And I guess,
So I couldn't answer the question.
I guess, I'm unsure of this connection between a PMO and preventing gentrification. And, hold on, and if I drive around Flagstaff, Sunnyside, to me, seems to be one of the places that will be most impacted by something like this. That's why I just, based on your comment, it seemed like a analogy to understand is what we're doing to prevent that, and are we fooling ourselves by thinking that?
Can I,
Duffy, yeah.
so the connection is my, can you hear me, Celia? The connection is my fault because I was originally asking if there would be financial resources for people who couldn't keep their property up. And that's how we sort of got onto the gentrification. It's also mentioned in this. So that's what I was asking, because I don't want people pushed out of their neighborhoods. And then we went on to how this, and then I did it again. The zoning code allows incompatible things, or buildings, that also pushes people out of neighborhoods.
Sure, it seems like the building code, the zoning code may have been having a bigger impact. And to your point, we don't want people, like, are we assuming that Sunnyside would be most impacted by this because people can't currently afford to keep up their property in the ways that this would dictate them be required to? Or are people choosing not to because it's not part of their value system, that they don't see the same value, I guess? And that's why, like, it's not just as simple as saying, well, we're going to impose this on everybody. We'll give them some money to do it. If they can't afford to, they may not want to.
Your name is Joe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Go ahead, Jesse.
Well, I come from it from a different standpoint, is that I think a lot of our neighbors are proud of their properties. Some of them can't afford to keep them up. Absentee landlords that don't give a whatever about their properties. And they also make those neighborhoods look bad so that they can come in and buy them at a cheaper rate and build apartments. And then guess what? They build the apartments. What happens, Abel? They don't take care of them, right? So this is fair as fair. I want my I want my house to look nice compared to the landlord from Scottsdale. And guess who's making more money? Not me. It's the landlord from Scottsdale that's coming in and taking in $1,500 a bedroom and taking it to California or wherever they're from. I'm just naming states.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that I have to look at it every day. They don't see it from their house. It's like the old carpenters can't see it from my house. And this is where I think, to me, the positive attitude or the positive intent is to make Flagstaff look nice. I mean, yeah, we got 3-story buildings, and you know what? I remember Mayor Donaldson saying, hey, we can't go sideways, we got to go up. Well, guess what? We're going up. And that's the building codes have done that. But I think if I can go out and live in a nice area that, and we're not looking at being punitive and, you know, somebody's going to jail or any of that stuff. It's just, I almost seem that it's more for absentee landlords, because most of the homeowners want to do a good job and they're proud of their properties. When the old people leave, then the kids say, hey, I'm done. How much you going to give me? And that's what happens. That's the gentrification part of it.
Yeah.
So to me, the intent is to make Flagstaff look nice. Sorry.
I think,
a little
can we
bit
go to an
long-winded.
online comment, Abel, then come back to you?
Celia's had her hand up, so I'm not sure if that's a holdover.
Do you have a comment, Celia?
No, that's a holdover. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
The gentrification started a long time ago, and it wasn't started because of the attempts to do stuff like this. It started because of the zoning stuff. And people are just moving out and others are taking advantage of it, just like Jeff said. So this is not going to help or hinder currently gentrification for the people that are currently buying homes to live in, not rentals, because there's too many apartments going in.
Yeah.
That gentrification is kind of almost automatic. It's just a circle.
Yeah.
So, but I do agree with Jess. What we're looking at this for in most of the people that I talk to, it's just our neighborhood. We just curbed and guttered just a few years ago, our neighborhood. It looks better just because of that.
Yeah.
But then we have a bunch that have left their property just not look good. And all we're concerned about was not the gentrification, not the turnover in population, because that's been happening no matter what, maybe because of some, I don't know. But the point is that we just want our houses to look better in our own neighborhood because I want to stay there.
Yeah.
Not looking at its effect on gentrification. I'm not.
I'm the one who introduced the idea of let's fund, the goal of this, understanding that we're not going to solve gentrification. It's a very complicated issue. I always say planners have not figured this one out. A market-based economy, right? At the end of the day, people look out for their financial well-being. That's part of what drives it. But again, I thought by maybe broadening and bringing this into the discussion, we could build some support and maybe, I think it is good to talk about it. And what are things we can do to try to preserve homes in Flagstaff? This isn't going to be the only tool that hopefully will have people thinking about investing in their property and keeping it. So,
But
we
I
have a
do-
comment online. Back to the
I-
room.
I do feel like listening to all this, though, I feel like a property care ordinance would provide some teeth to code enforcement to probably help target those absent landlords in neighborhoods all over town. And again, I can just give you an example, NAU's out and we took a walk around the neighborhood and you can tell exactly which houses are rentals by the piles of crap that are now piled up at the curb. And I just feel like this would give some teeth to the rest of us to say, we're not making money off of our houses. We live here. I feel like to support some of the comments that were just made, I want things to look nice, and you're not taking care. You're just using this to make money. So I feel like this could be really positive to, help mitigate some of that.
Thank you, Dana.
You're welcome.
Joe, did you have a comment or?
Go ahead, I can't remember.
What I'm hearing a lot of the comments of people in the room is that the primary objective of this ordinance is to make property look nice. And I don't see that anywhere in the purpose of the draft here, right? We speak about health, safety, welfare, hazardous and dangerous. And I guess you could change maybe welfare would be kind of something that maybe of the how things look nice, but I just think it's important to be clear about what our goal is, because if we put all these words in here and then really our goal is to make things look nice, that's different.
Well, I think one of the challenges with, laws and ordinances is, defining these terms. And so looking nice, right? That's so subjective, right? And so I think we focus on the condition of the property, right? Is it deteriorating? Are the windows broken? Is the roof sagging? Are there failing materials? Is the paint peeling? That's the kind of language you see in PMOs. And so I do think we want to focus on, right, the condition of the structure, and try to avoid these kind of subjective terms like we want it to look nice. But you do things like neat and orderly, right? Keeping your property neat and orderly, again, kind of open to probably subjectivity. But that's really one of our challenges is to get the language that will work.
She remembered.
Okay,
Dan, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask, do we have any research or have we asked our community what makes it difficult to keep property up? Why are we keeping our property up? Is it the cost? Is it I don't care, I don't have any stakes here?
Right.
Because I think that information is really gonna help us understand. We don't want to set anybody up for failure with the property care ordinance.
Yeah.
We want everyone to feel successful and to feel safe and welcomed and enjoy their home. And we all have different standards
Right.
of what that looks like. So I'm just curious, has the city ever asked these questions? Any of that information?
We haven't done like a formal survey or research on it, but I'm just looking at Reggie as our code compliance manager. So Reggie talks to folks every day who he contacts on these issues. I'm sure you hear a range of comments, but do you want to talk about that issue a little bit?
Sorry, Reggie.
It's a difficult task because, you know, it's not just the absentee landlords. A lot of times it's folks that live there with orders. And so that's a whole different element and knowledge that we're trying to gain so that we can know how to best help them because it is an illness. And so that's why I like what we're doing with this property care ordinance, because for a lot of those people, they can't afford it to clean it up either, because we're actually working with one right now. I kind of closed it out today to give him a little break until another month or two, but we just spent over $12,000 to help him clean his property. And it's still got a long way to go. And so this property care ordinance, I think, can help us incentivize people to want to do it because they know we're not going to fine them, take them to court, put them in even worse standard. And so we're offering this, I'm kind of using this as a model to give it to council to say, yeah, we need to buy more money for these types of things. If we can get something like that, I know still take time, but over some years, we can really get a lot of properties cleaned up that we've been working on for years and with no success.
So Reggie, is it your experience that the financial resource is a part of what you hear the most, or?
Yeah, that's a big part of it, because most of it is in the lower income neighborhoods. And those people don't have the income or source because they're elderly, a lot of them, or disabled, or mental health issues. And so that's what I run into on a daily basis. Those absentee landlords that we know of, though, we go at them in a different way. So, but it's a wide range of things, and I'm really grateful for this conversation because I know they tried to do it years ago as a PMO, which was kicked to the curb. And I think this will make people feel like the city is actually trying to help. And that's my main goal, and that's why I do what I do.
And which is why I really like a lot of the revisions that were made from when we first started, because it feels more like anybody and everybody can understand this, right? There isn't language in here of like, what does blighting mean? Let me look that up. And right. So I like the direction that we are moving towards.
Good. Yeah, go ahead, Duffy.
I do have a question. I'll try and speak loud, Celia. I have a question. Would this relate to landscape? Because we walk out of our front door to rentals across the street that are landscape mess. And the people have a lot of visitors who can't easily park in front of the house and get out on the passenger side because the landscaping is so overgrown. And I walk out of my house that I take care of, and I have to look at that. But it's also impacting that they park more on our side, including the teenage boys who left the pile of stuff my dog found exciting the other day on our parkway strip. So does this address when there are landscape issues? Because those tenants have to pay their rent, but the landlords don't have to do the maintenance on the yard.
How far can we take it?
I don't know.
Part of it is, we are going to get into this a little bit today. I was looking at the topics for today. But like Mark just said, I mean, we at a past meeting, we talked about some PMOs just saying like you can't have weeds over, you can't have growth over 6 inches 8 inches, 10 inches, pick your measurement, right? We currently don't have that in Flagstaff. We don't require landscaping. I think typically it's something in response to, it's become a fire hazard if something has become so overgrown that it's either blocking the line of sight, it's overgrowing a sidewalk. Potentially it's a hazard. I'm looking at Reggie
Yeah.
for confirmation. That's kind of how we address it now.
We basically, if it's encroaching on passage of the sidewalk or trees growing down and the branches are hanging over the right of way and we're hit you in the head, that type of thing. Those are the types of things we deal for landscaping right now. As far as a property that has weeds, 5 feet high and things like that, the only way we can do anything about that is if the fire department, our firewise people can deem it a fire hazard. And so I try to incorporate them as much as I can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, this tenant is a firefighter.
But think about new definitions of native plantings, native grasses. How do we do that? So.
Yeah, native landscaping is intended to be tall grass and, look a little native, not manicured.
I don't know if the city has the manpower to manage the landscaping in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
This is so bad, excuse me, Flanagan, this is so bad that they put out car seats and you can't see them anymore.
Where is this?
Staff's
I'll
been
take a look.
It's on staff's been 700.
Do you have comments, Stephen?
Yeah, not to, because I know we started with a discussion on the intent and purpose, and
Yeah.
then we've kind of branched off.
It's fine.
But we started to talk about native landscapes and the plants and those things. And Reggie, thank you for your comments on like the hazards and how they're blocking right of ways and things like that. I've been doing research into invasive plants and how different property care or PMOs in different cities across the country have started to address native landscapes and using PCOs like we are doing here to encourage native landscapes and having things in there talking about removing invasive species specifically. And a lot of nuisance and invasive species create all sorts of problems. And if there's a way that we could incorporate that into this, I think that would be a step in the right direction. And if we are encouraging, it's not like requiring, we are encouraging native landscapes, then we're going to use less water overall as things get drier and drier and water resources become more and more important. And if we do more native landscapes or encourage that and provide resources, most likely we'll have less issues of these overgrown areas that are unkempt, because if we plant native landscapes, they tend to take care of themselves a lot easier than a lot of other things. So again, encouraging things, providing resources and education without requiring, other than like maybe removing invasives that are along like in a perimeter, because they grow like crazy and are hard to manage and control after that. So since we were talking about native landscapes and things.
Do you have an online comment?
The city,
Is
I found you guys have something published about native plants. I couldn't even begin to tell you where I found it, but I found it. You have something already online because
We do.
Okay, because we xeriscaped our front yard last summer and I specifically went there and downloaded the list to look at the plants that I could possibly use out there. So, I mean, there is a document there.
Yeah, no, the city did develop like a resource guide a number of years
Yeah.
ago, I think in touch with NAU.
Okay,
Native landscaping, I think we do offer that as a resource.
okay.
Jesse,
I just have a question for Billy. Nobody here? I guess not.
I'll represent Bill.
You represent. So I know, and it irks the heck out of me, O'Reilly's on the west side. They spend thousands of dollars on their landscaping. I'm sure the city required it, and it's all gone. They put it in, but there was nothing said in that it's required to be maintained. So now you have oil cans, beer bottles, I mean, beautiful landscaping.
Yeah.
This is something, and I don't want to get into the nitpicky part of it. On some of our neighborhoods, when somebody pulls a permit, are they required landscaping?
Not on a single family home.
Okay, how about apartments?
Apartments for new construction, there are landscaping requirements for probably the
Which
edge
can
and
be
the parking
incorporated
lots.
into what he's saying.
Yeah.
You know, the zero scaping and minimum water use.
And I think what we do is we monitor them for a year. And so essentially they're supposed to be alive at the end of the first year. I think that's our standard, but it's just, it becomes one of those resource issues, right? And how long?
Yeah.
I mean, even at the IHOP, they had stuff that died, I remember in the first year, and it was, it's hard work to go
It
back
is
to them
hard.
and get them. But they're supposed to keep them alive and maintain them, yes.
They
You
shouldn't,
can't stop all bad
they
behavior,
shouldn't have cut
right?
down
It's
the pine
one of
tree
those
that
things.
was planted there by somebody that we all
Big
know,
Pine, yeah.
and then replace it with a new one. But anyways,
But typically what triggers landscaping is construction. An addition, typically not. It could potentially, but yeah. And we don't have landscaping requirements for single family homes. Or duplexes. All right, this has been a really good discussion. Are we ready to move on to the topics for today, or? I mean, this is the topic of the day, what we've just been talking about. But we've got a little more focused discussion here. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. He's going to walk us through the worksheets. And just for the whole group, everybody here, this is kind of a process in process. So one of the things we're doing is we're creating these worksheets, right? And we're going to post these online with each meeting. And so the intent is folks who are either here today, who weren't able to make it today, can go back, look at these materials. Mark's given us space to provide comments. We want to hear your comments. So you can write on these, you can type on these, you can send them to Mark, myself. Mark's got his contact information on here. So we want you to use these as worksheets and get them back to us.
And I got plenty of them, so if you need an extra one, just take home and play with. I have that. So it's time for semantics again. Let me be very clear. I was inspired by Reggie. Not because he's a shirt dresser, which I am not, but be sure to never, ever mention enforcement. It is code compliance. It's a different kind of approach. It works. It's the only way it works. So that's why we use that term, code compliance. Heavy hand does not work in a lot of cases. So inspiring me, it's no longer property maintenance, it's property care, which defines it will be an ordinance, but it will also be a program. So that's why we made that change. So it may not seem like a lot, but it's a change of attitude that we're looking at doing. When we go through these three, I picked these three, and there's previous ones we've done. Some of these things could move and be absorbed in the previous discussion we've had. So we start out with a term. Do you have that one, Duffy? Do you have this one? It says nuisance perimeter frontage. I can get you one.
Here it is.
That's for today, yeah.
I got Clint.
I got Mark. Thank you.
Okay.
No, I have that one.
It's confusing.
There was a previous. That name drives me. Nuisance is like a fly buzzing around your head. See, that really bothers me. I don't even like the term, but this is what is in typical in ordinances. So most people that talk about attractive nuisance, the classic is a refrigerator on the porch that the child locks himself in and dies. It could be a storage shed. It can be an open building that attracts criminal activity. We had a project that people knew was vacant for a week and it became a total den of iniquity. So attracting, this one is kind of based upon safety. It's based upon problems, criminality, those type of things that can take place just like that. So that's why it's often in those type of ordinances.
I was just at somebody's house day before yesterday, and they have these gorgeous blue spruce trees next door with all these big giant branches hanging over her property, and they're gorgeous. They really are beautiful.
That's perimeter.
Okay.
So we'll go over perimeter and see where that
Okay.
potentially. But they do fall off, they do impact.
Yeah.
What are property.
Put slap all over.
So think about this name, whether it's wonderful nuisance or not. And so I've organized these, tried to keep it super simple. A standard is something that you can always go back to. So you start out with a giant statement, you go through guidelines, you see if those guidelines cover something, you go to the definitions, and then you work your way back again to the standard, and you go, did the person really solve this major problem? That's a standard. So I'll read the standard. Property care standard for attractive nuisance. I added hazard. And that's why it may go into another category. Eliminate hazards that present an attractive nuisance or hazard by removing and or securing aspects of the property that may attract persons, that may cause harm, safety, or criminal activities. That's the standard. So open and unsecured buildings, including storage buildings, sheds, areas that attract criminal or problematic activities. Appliances or containers that can trap a person. This one we've talked about on another issue. Sharp and jagged objects at the property that may cause harm to a person. Rectify loose objects that may fall or present a tripping hazard to persons, and then installations that pose a safety threat. I just throw these out, trying to get a category out there. So.
Celia's got a comment.
Celia. Go ahead, Celia.
Sorry, I had myself muted. So under the property care standard, I wonder if you could clarify what you mean by safety. In other words, in the last clause there, may attract persons that cause safety. I can see cause harm or conduct criminal, engage in criminal activities, but.
Just dismissed my language. I'm an architect and.
Okay.
We're counting on you for putting it into English. So, along with other people.
But no, I wouldn't give it up that quickly. I mean, unsafe conditions, and an unsafe condition, something where somebody could get injured. It doesn't read right. It may not read right, but I do think safety wouldn't necessarily delete that, but maybe we need to clarify what we mean by that.
One of the things is like an abandoned vehicle where the children get inside of it, hurt themselves. Attractive nuisance to me is something that it's going to attract young people and maybe get hurt.
Right. So in the bigger picture, do you think that that is its own category? That you have something out there that really does instantly impact people?
Oh, yeah, I have a swing, big, beautiful swing.
Yeah.
And kids sometimes get there and we don't even know them. They're inside the yard. That to me is an attractive nuisance. And you can't blame them for going over there. I grabbed those kids and I said, just ask if we're here. And if we're not here, you can't play on it.
And that does the condition of that, is it built the correct way? Or is it done in a way that it's not intended to be used? That really would almost instantly cause harm, like a refrigerator that
Would it be fair or appropriate somewhere in here to make that general statement that an attractive nuisance can be considered any object or item that is could potentially use, made to code or something like that? Some sort of language that makes it broad enough where we don't have to list like a car, a truck.
That's what we're always trying to keep it simple. So guideline, simple, but definitions are going to be important. And I haven't been putting those in because that would make your brain blow up.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm definitely.
This applies to the entire property? So like, that would essentially outlaw trampolines in the city of Flagstaff, because they tend to be pretty dangerous and any kid can get on a trampoline and seriously hurt themselves. Don't swing, you can swing up and fall off it and get seriously hurt on it. So that,
I think that's the definition of something that was designed, that's meant to be used, something that's not designed for that. And maybe that's in the definition. I don't know. These
Yeah, I mean,
are
we're
really
not
good
intending
points.
to outlaw swing sets and trampolines, by no means. That's
Sure.
not the intent of this.
because I
But
just struggle with
then
the,
that-
Adam,
The property owner's protected because the kids are trespassing. They're coming onto your property. Like we had a trampoline in the backyard. If somebody came into my backyard when I wasn't here and let themselves in the gate and jumped on it and got hurt, I can't imagine I'd have any liability there, but you know, I don't know.
Robbers have successfully for getting injured on property, so. Yeah, you never know. Do you think that in the definition that would help clarify this strange thing known as nuisance?
So I think that we need a really good definition of attractive nuisance before we can create a standard. And I'm not sure that way that it is written in my experience is actually a standard. And I'm not sure about guidelines. I think maybe we need to have a little conversation about what is a standard and what is a guideline. In other words, but I do think that the other important point to remember is that attractive nuisance is actually a legal term. I mean, it is in the law, and this is where there's overlap, right? I don't know if nuisance is nuisance defined anywhere else in the zoning code. But I do think this is a really important issue, the nuisance issue, because it encompasses so many things that happen in the city. I think you could define them as an attractive nuisance.
That's good to know that people are solid with it. It is something that needs to be done. And just to go over the reason I go with standards, as a historic preservation person, I found them very effective. It is the way the National Historic Preservation Act follows. The standard is the ultimate test when you come back through. It's the main rule. So as I said, you go through state a standard, provide enough guidelines that you can, but you can't provide all the guidelines that are possible. You have definitions. And then Reggie would go out there and try to be a good guy. And we'd work our way back to seeing if they hit compliance by rereading that standard.
And I just wanted to add that nuisance is addressed in the Title VI, which is police code.
Did you hear that, Title VI?
It talks about the building standards, and that's where you can find the terminology for nuisance.
Yeah. So one of the handouts we have, and it's on the webpage, the project webpage in our existing city code is, like Reggie just said, there's a whole section called nuisances, and it's in the police code, Title VI. Now, this definition of nuisances, right on the front, it's very much tied to the condition of a building, right? So it's a building, a shed, any structure of any kind which is or may hereafter become dilapidated or unsanitary or out of repair, neglect, or other cause to render it unfit, unsafe for habitation, for occupancy. So again, our nuisance definition is very much about the safety of a building and whether it should be occupied. I think I talked about this last time. Typically, we use our building code to enforce unsafe buildings. So we will get calls about somebody living in a house that maybe isn't meeting building code, housing code, which is, running water, hot water, ventilation. And so we usually use the building code as a way to say, do we go out and inspect it? Is it habitable or not? And we have marked buildings uninhabitable until it's been repaired. But this is another section that could be used very similarly. What's really interesting about it is there's a whole process in here about the abatement, right? And you get the health department and you get the city engineer, I think it's the public works director, and they go out and they do an inspection and they report, and then they have a hearing in front of city council. And this is I don't think we've ever used this process since I've been here. And council can make a finding that, yeah, it's a nuisance and take action. Take action without this process. We've cleaned up properties where we've had an unresponsive property owner, and then we bill them. We also, again, this answer your question about nuisances. Go ahead, Reggie.
Make sure that the building gets secured. It's not always, fixed, so to speak, but as long as it's no easy access. Now, again, once they put the plywood and things like that up to block the windows and the doors, Yeah, they do get ripped off at times and people get back in and then we go over again and have them security again. So it's, you know, it is a process and like you said, Dan, the process in the code is lengthy. Ultimately, council can make a final determination if we ever go down that road. Fortunately for me, we haven't at this point, but we could at some point.
Did you have a comment, question, Duffy?
Yeah, so from what Celia said, maybe it can't be changed, but attractive nuisance sounds like a pretty nuisance. So maybe an attracting nuisance, so that it attracts children. But I think also animals need to be addressed there because we have skunk bait in our neighborhood because skunks are finding places to live and reproduce and they're rabid. So under my shed, if I see any animals living under there, I block it up. But anything that allows rats or skunks or whatever, I think should be included in this because that has implications even for kids.
We might bump that to one of our previous ones,
Okay.
which that was kind of covered in one of our previous.
But what you just said is scary.
Harboring pests was one of them.
And because you're not harboring pets. You just have them in your yard because we live so close to the forest.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my fault. Yeah, and that's what people would say to, because I live right next to a green belt in Sunnyside. And I always have skunks, but we don't put the food out anymore for the dog, you know, and but we could go down that direction and that's scary.
Yeah. I think we've got an online comment.
Celia and also Dana still has her hand up, so I'm not sure.
Did you have a comment, Celia?
Yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can remember it. Oh, I think I would like to offer to provide some edits to the standard for an attractive nuisance. And I also think that we might want to cross-reference in this PCO, the section of the code that deals with nuisance in the police regulations. Just so that people are aware when they're looking through it, that there's another section that has some of the similar terminology.
Yeah, no, that's one of the big decisions we have to make is which sections do we keep in the code? Do we cross-reference them? Do we compile them, try to, you know, bring them together?
I like the idea of cross-referencing because it backs up.
Yeah.
It's not made up.
And it's already in place.
Yeah. Did you have a comment or question, Dana?
No, I did not. Thank you.
Okay.
And the terminology of nuisance is used in several places in other areas of the code. So like the littering code specifically addresses attractive nuisance. So if we're using it in one place, we should try and
And it
use
sounds,
it throughout. So
sounds like it's a legal term, but for the non-initiated, it sounds like a pretty nuisance.
So this is another one of the handouts. It's, again, I've provided here and it's on our webpage, is a section out of chapter 6 on littering. And it does have some of these terms defined.
And this code does address the accumulation of litter, which is infested or exhibits an infestation for insects, rodents, and other animals. So that you're concerned about animals is addressed already. In
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
My point is just the, what's the difference between a compost pile and a litter pile? By that definition.
So it depends on what's living in there. And are they harboring, what is the?
By definition, a compost pile should have insects and worms and other stuff like that living.
But a compost pile is usually contained in some,
It's maintained.
right, like you
There's a variety of different types of
compost.
structures and stuff
Right.
like, yeah.
Yeah, but
And I don't think anyone's gonna come to your house and say your compost pile is ruining things unless it is actually impacting your neighbors. Can you speak to that at all?
You just landed on it perfectly.
Okay,
So, yeah,
yeah.
we don't go out looking for that thing unnamed, but if we do get a call, we will go investigate because we may find it's not a real valid or a valid violation. And so at that point, we kind of leave it alone. But yeah, we get those kind of calls occasionally, but it's usually if it's, you know, a bunch of skunks are hanging around, they're still coming around, they're living, or their rats living in a pile. And most of the times, and that's where we can also involve the health department, county health department, because then they give us some more tools to be able to address that for the cleanup.
And I think it specifically says throughout these different codes, is it a health and safety concern? Your compost pile, health and safety concern to your neighbors or yourself probably should get rid of it. But someone composting, I don't think is a main focus.
And that's where we have used, we've worked with the health department in the past to identify properties that have become a harborage for vermin. So mice, rats, things like that, and we can take action. Do we have an online comment? Go ahead,
Oh.
Celia.
I'm sorry, that was an accident.
That's fine. Come on up, Mark. You're not done yet. I know I jumped up and started talking, but are we done with nuisance or we got some work to do on this?
Yeah, okay. Think about where you might want to put this. If it can be a nuisance, if it can be absorbed. Same type of thing with this perimeter standards. It may be absorbed into other areas. But just because it was mentioned as a separate thing that I picked out of my brain, I called it a perimeter standard to just separate it out. So property care standard for property perimeter. Each property shall not encroach upon the adjacent or public right-of-way with aspects that impact the safe enjoyment of the neighboring property or public right-of-way. Guidelines: remove encroachments that impact adjacent properties within the public right-of-way of sidewalks, parkways, roads, alleys, of materials, fences, vegetation, and similar. Maybe some of that should go into definition versus just encroaching into public right-of-way, maybe simple enough. Into neighboring properties. This is a huge issue. Doesn't bother a lot of people unless it's your neighbor that's doing this to you. Into neighboring properties with materials, fences, like say a falling over fence, vegetation, and similar, not defined very well by me. Of materials, litter, insects, vermin, and other pests that are sourced from the property impacting the health, safety, welfare, and beneficial use of a neighboring property. Maybe it stays here, maybe it finds a home somewhere else.
Celia.
Celia. Please help.
So I do have a comment actually back to the nuisances. I hadn't had a chance to look at the chapter 6-04 from the code. And if I heard you correctly, Dan, that chapter is under police regulations. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's my feeling that somehow I think nuisances should be linked in some way, shape, or form to the property care ordinance. I don't think at this point it's in the best interest of the public to keep nuisances as a completely separate chapter in police regulations and these other issues as a property care ordinance. And I don't actually know the solution yet, but I think it's something that really deserves a lot of thought. And I'm just wondering about, so 01 under nuisances is basically the definition. And then everything else is, it looks to me about process. And I don't know what the property care ordinance is going to look like when it comes to process, but there may be an opportunity to consolidate. I guess that's what I'm saying, without compromising anything. And I don't know what that would look like.
That's valid.
Would it be possible to say nuisance as also defined in here and just link this and not have to, because this is it's already there and gives the police authority to do things, right? We don't want to take this away from where it already is, link it over, say, or as defined in here or something along those lines. I don't know how that would actually look a read just to reference it and say, this also applies here. But it's
Yeah,
not the only.
Make sure I'm not the,
Yeah, you're
make
not.
sure I'm not. This is our
Yes.
engagement, your
This-
ideas.
I think that's, I mean, to me, that sounds really reasonable. What I'm not sure about is why. So the police have this certain authority outlined in chapter 6. And it suggests to me that the property care ordinance will not find a home in under police regulations. But we are going to have some sort of enforcement section of the property care ordinance. I get that this is not, the intent is not to, I mean, we've talked about how the city wants to implement this, right? It's a much more gentle approach, but that doesn't mean there won't be enforcement authority in cases where the more gentle approach doesn't work. So my point is that I appreciate the idea of not wanting to move it out of chapter 6. I like the idea of linking, but I just wonder if we're going to use the same exact words in the property care ordinance that are in chapter 6, we should talk to the attorneys.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a big part of the task is, and I've met with Kevin Finsel, one of our deputy city attorney. I think it's kind of a staff. It starts out with the staff is once we have this draft ordinance, I'll call it, then we have to come back and look at all these other sections and decide, yeah, do we keep those where they are? Do we roll it into the property care ordinance? Do we just cross-reference? And so there's going to be a list of these things that I've pulled out of the city code that we need to make those decisions on. And I agree. I think it starts with the attorney's office and thinking about how these would play out. You know, I'm not a big fan of keeping something in the code that we don't ever use, like this long process, but maybe it's something we need to keep in there as a tool, right? So I think that's where the staff needs to come up with some recommendations on these issues and present it to the public in this group.
Does this work along the lines of finding the things that police used to deal with that they really aren't the best person to address right from the start, where Reggie goes and talks to them? The ultimate might be the police go, but it starts with the property care ordinance and a more gentler approach.
Reggie can speak to that issue.
I can definitely say, although it is under the police code, under Title VI, and it's for the police, we're the ones that utilize it. And so police aren't the ones going out looking, for nuisance. They do respond to noise complaints, because usually those are at night if we're not here. But things of this nature, the building things, the varmints, so to speak, we're the ones that do it, but that's where we find the code in order to use it for compliance.
So maybe we just need a connector, right? Like a little process of our PCO that connects us, something we do first before we then get to the police.
Does this need to be separated between public right-of-ways, which are looked at one way, and then impact of a neighbor on neighboring properties? Or is it in its right kind of place? Talking about how things act around the perimeter of a problem property. I have no preference on that.
Are you thinking parkway strips?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Because
yeah.
I don't even, it's not clear to me who's responsible
No.
for parkway strips. Like,
Yeah.
we take responsibility for it, but I'm not sure. Like the trees in our parkway strip, we have to get permission to prune them because they belong to the city. So I don't know.
Yeah, put a big giant star by that one to think about.
I mean, the code does address this, adjacent parkways and sidewalks. So, some people know this, not everybody, but usually the right-of-way line, which is also your property line, right? So here's your house, here's the property line, then you've got the public right-of-way. Well, the street and curb may be way out here, right? There could be 10, 20 feet that presents as your front yard, but it's actually public right-of-way. And so the code does require adjacent owners to maintain adjacent right-of-way and sidewalks. Not only clear sidewalks, we're really supposed to repair damaged sidewalks. We do have a program to help share the cost on that with some owners. I've not heard about the tree issue before, whether you need to get permission or not.
I believe what you're saying.
But the code does say the adjacent owner is responsible.
So for the.
Reggie will check if I'm wrong on
the
that.
Trees, they do have to get permission, but they always grant it.
Sure, pay for it.
Because it is, but I know they've had some trees in the amenity strips that then have buckled the sidewalks that, again, technically the owner's responsibility, but they didn't plant the tree. And so we tried to use common sense and, collaboration to kind of figure out that instead of putting the whole cost on the property owner. I know Scott Overton's actually in the process of trying to maybe somehow change some of that or find a way to, have it more of the city responsibility. And so we always try to find a way to not put that kind of burden on the property owner.
So,
Go ahead. Did you have a comment, Celia?
No, my hand stayed up unintentionally. I'm sorry.
Fine, we're fine with this. So do you think that that as far as impacting a neighbor with, debris, vermin, that type of stuff can be absorbed in one of these other sections? And that the perimeter is more public? Is there kind of concurrence on that, maybe? I think it can probably be put in another section. I don't know if it needs to be a target.
The good neighbor policies, usually if you have a good neighbor, we take care of each other. Like my trees are on the roof of the other guy and I pay for it to make sure it's trimmed. And his trees are on my side and so we work together. Where this is probably enforceable is that absentee landlord doesn't care, doesn't even know the trees, or whatever. So to me, I think this section is for those that have not done anything since they built the place or bought it.
Maybe use a concentration on
I think it should say separate.
separate and
Not
separate out the public right away in somewhere else. Is it appropriate in this second?
I think so, because those two sound separate of each
Okay.
other.
See, I'm thinking side by side versus front.
Yeah, and I have frontage one is the next.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. But I do think that some of our side-by-side neighbors don't always see eye to eye.
Well, that's true.
And so I think that that's helpful to have something in here that.
Reggie, do you have any examples?
Yeah, because I think about our.
Resources.
Well, that is very helpful, I think. I think we can work with that. We're burning along here, frontage. I will jump into that one. This one is approaching that world of, it's my opinion. Which is what I'm really, is it pretty? Is it acceptable? Really trying to stay away from that, but trying to address the issues that bring down the neighborhood, detract from the neighborhood, decrease property values, decrease your joy and pride in a neighborhood. That is an issue. How we define it under compliance efforts is what we're looking at. So I'll give this one a whirl here. Property care standard for street frontage. Resolve both visual and physical issues with neglected and vacant buildings and negatively impact property values and the desirability of adjacent properties and neighborhoods. I probably shouldn't have just put buildings, there is property out front, there's land out front. Again, I can always use help on English. Guidelines: repair, secure, remove, and properly dispose of deteriorated materials which indicate an appearance of abandonment visual from the street frontage. And you can tell instantly. Door hangers, mail, flyers, things thrown on the front porch that are flying all around. That's this remove litter, door hangers, mail that accumulates at the home or building's entry. you know instantly when somebody's not in that house. The next step is repair broken, loose, and damaged building components such as a screen door, windows, shutters, and other materials. So we're getting into this building code thing again. Graffiti shall be removed immediately and effectively. Again, let's work with the language here. Now we kind of go into this vacant building thing. I had some places to add comments and change. Vacant buildings shall have secured door locks and secure windows that deny access into the property owner. No, that's not. To fully secure and or board up a vacant building to resolve break-in problems until long-term solutions are determined. We get blamed for compliance. It is the property owner that should be taking care of the property. Site shall be properly posted for no trespassing, include contact information, phone and email of management and or owner to report problems that impact neighbors and neighbor desirabilities. Sorry, that's a weird word. I actually used this one in Butte, Montana, where everybody kept saying, why don't you do something about it? It's not us. If you decide to leave your property in that condition and neighbors don't know who to contact and our process takes so long, call the person that's responsible for it, have them post the property if they're going to leave it in that condition. So I actually it caused some issues, but it also resolved a lot of issues because those people did not like getting the phone calls from the neighbor. It's back to Jesse going, good neighbor policy. Well, they don't know who to contact. And particularly here, everything is under a living trust. Who are you talking to? No idea. You can't even contact the person. You don't know who to contact. You can't find it on the county site. So that's something that didn't work for me. Doors secured with lock screws, wood blocking on doors to prevent access. Windows secured with screws, wood blocking on windows to prevent access. Board up. What's the correct word? Is it mothballing? Is it building preservation? Is it secure buildings? This is an appearance thing, but again, it is, do you care about the building while you're working on it and while it's not occupied? Panels shall be cut to fit windows and door openings. Panels are to be painted or stained to improve appearance. Panels shall be secured with adequate screws and or tamper resistant. Alternate head screws, head designs, drilled out heads, all to provide additional security. Problem areas of entries are to be provided with additional means such as interior blocking with through bolts or similar. This is one Reggie has talked about, being able for the police to monitor. We could go as far as providing translucent, quote, board up, so police could monitor the inside. So you could do a viewport, or you could go to the point of doing something more that looks like a window that's clear. So how far do we take this appearance thing? I know it doesn't resolve things that bother everybody, but I do think it is stuff that is potentially able to be done.
Do we, the statements that say things like negatively impact property values? Is there any work out there that has evaluated properties and the change in property values or those kinds of things? I guess I'm just really concerned that's super subjective. And these days it's like that. I don't think anything does impact property values, to be honest.
I know, it is a
temporary house, no matter what the yard looks like, right? So I'm sorry if anybody said that I'm negatively impacting their property value, that's not true right now.
It's an old term.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I don't know, to me it seems, when I read that, I often think of, we don't want your kind here or negatively impacting property values. We don't want, our neighborhood is a rich neighborhood. It's not a poor neighborhood. And I don't know, that's what I read when I see that. So I think it would be great to get rid of that kind of language in this.
Yep. Somewhere in that world of welfare, enjoyment of property, enjoyment of, I don't know where that is. in this changing world, so.
Could you take out the word negatively and it would still read? I mean, is this only about vacant?
Well, there's the neglected is the first, is before that as well. So the neglected encompasses therefore anything that, any of it, you know.
So this is kind of that, you drive by, this isn't just trash out front, this is you drive by the property and you look at it and you go, it's affecting my enjoyment. It's
This is only
impacting my neighborhood. It's a frontage thing. So
What about vacant only
I
structure?
don't know, no, not necessarily.
Because that's how it's written, is
Right.
only for vacant.
This goes back to the, I have a toilet out front with flowers in it. Art, is it not art? How far do we put, I don't think we can judge what is art, but we can, I think, judge something that is problematic to the neighborhood.
In next door, people sent stuff to me because I asked for it. And one thing they said is, I don't care how the damn house is painted. I don't care. And it says it in here about panels to be painted or stained to improve appearance. And they say, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if there's a toilet with a power, you know, with the plant in it. You know, and that's the kind of stuff that I think we do need to be careful of, because that's the HOA stuff.
Yep.
You know, just as a little example, my son is a horn hunter. He collects elk horns, deer horns. He goes out in the woods. So his wife had put in a garden, and he very strategically placed horns in that. His HOA said you can't have one.
Definitely don't want to approach that, but this is kind of in that nuisance world where your lack of taking care of the property virtually puts up an advertising sign that says, break in, have a party in here. It's kind of attractive nuisance world a little bit here. Jessica?
Yeah, we had that same issue. We still do at the old trailer park, the Arrowhead. They finally moved out the trailer, but they forgot to lock the gates. As a matter of fact, the panels are down. So there's children playing in that abandoned property with, I don't know if the wires are live, Reggie, or not, but there's stuff that they can hurt themselves with. And so to me, that's what I see this more effective than somebody's toilet out front. To me, that doesn't, I don't have to, maybe if I had to see it every day, it bothered me, maybe somehow it would get broken overnight or something. I don't know. But the thing of it is that I think that we're getting off the subject as, we don't want to get so nitpicky
No.
That was the point.
And hopefully this is,
we want to give Reggie something to work with.
hopefully this does the ability to give a notice that they have neglected their property.
Well,
And then it's the frontage view of it is inviting
one
further neglect.
that bothers me is the old Pueblo Motel. I mean, they should have just left it alone. Now it's an attractive nuisance. They got a tie back as doorways. And to me, you can see where people are cutting it and going in there, and I don't know what they're
They
doing.
do have a development proposal.
Yeah, but it's still.
Taking a long time.
I hope.
I mean, it's sort of a shame, but you can see it. Yeah, they're trying to do their security, but it's an eyesore.
But that is, it's actually kind of an example of that. Well, I'm gonna do this in a year, but I'm just gonna let it be like it is. So can we take an action that says, if you're going to leave a building vacant, that you do certain things on the frontage? That's what I'm thinking out loud here. And I didn't do it very well, but I did it as a first step. Any comments on? Is it important to pursue frontage?
I think to some degree, like going back to the standard, to go back to what was being addressed with the negatively impacting property values and that whole second half, like what is the actual point of this standard? Is it to keep the property values of the neighborhood up? No, this should be more about that health and safety aspect and the removing of an attractive nuisance. So really, I don't think we need like that second half of that sentence. It could simply read resolve both visual and physical issues with neglected or vacant buildings, because that kind of takes care of your point of the way it was reading of neglected and vacant implies that, oh, it's only dealing with vacant buildings. So if we have changed and to or neglected or vacant buildings, boom. And then from there, we go into the guidelines that specifically address repair, secure, remove, and properly dispose of deteriorated materials, which indicate an appearance of abandonment, or I think probably another word needs to be added in there to address like the safety issues visible from the street frontage. And like removing litter and all those items are, I think, really important. And then addressing the like boarding up of things. I think having options would be great for folks, whether they want to paint it or have certain doorways have like an opening so you can actually see in there, so that way you can make sure things are safe and above board. I think having options written in there would be really good. And also in here, I know during one of our first meetings, we were talking about like time frame. That motel's been sitting like that for a long time. What sort of time frame would be reasonable to have like things put up in that fashion? Is this a place that we could address that?
Yeah. And you could also see that our discussion on attractive nuisance could be here.
Yep.
Versus its own world.
Yeah,
If
it
people are,
definitely could.
people are kind of thinking that way. I'm just fine with that. Throw the hot potato out there and have you guys try to help us with it.
Well, the other thing, Mark, is in 2 weeks, are looking at our future agenda here. We've got building deterioration, abandoned buildings, vacant undeveloped properties. So we're going to have a robust conversation, I think, about kind of what you've tied into this frontage. So
Yeah.
in your mind, the reason you put it here in the frontage is the idea is it's what somebody's viewing from the front of the property.
And that it's instantly attracting problems.
Yeah.
And that doing some visual things does stop criminal activity. It does stop further things.
I know you're seeking input here, but do you feel like this would be covered in 2 different sections then? We're gonna have sections on, for sure, building deterioration and abandoned buildings.
It may all get,
Be both.
it may get absorbed as its own section. I keep thinking that way. And simple. When we keep trying to define it all, we'll never do it. And then somebody will grab onto it when we're trying to get this passed, and we won't get it passed to even make it more effective. That's my concern. So I'm pretty basic. I keep going with simple language and simple processes. And we won't cover everything. And remember, we are sending this out to legal as well. And they will have an opinion. So,
Well, excuse me, I'm sorry. I sort of agree with Abel here. We don't want to be an HOA.
no,
We just want to make, what's the buzzword the city of Flagstaff uses all the time? Quality of life at a higher altitude. I think that's what we should do. I mean, we don't need to be picking on neighbors or what have you. I think we just need to give you guys tools to be able to, so that Reggie can do his job. He's doing a great job. Better.
with funding, with equipment.
Well, exactly. I mean, and council needs to put up.
Yeah. And we will talk about compliance extensively on how we do it. And we'll listen to your suggestions, number of notices, number of resources. Yeah, that's a huge issue. So.
I see that we have a littering chapter, and our litter has kind of made its way through this. And I'm concerned about the litter. My husband and I own a home right there. You can see it. And we are constantly picking up other people's trash and litter. And it drives me nuts because it's my home and I don't like what it does to my home. But literally it's a full-time job, as Reggie knows, because you know right where I'm talking about. But it's like essentially like this PCO could really impact me because the litter just comes right down the street and it just bundles in front of our home and we're out there every day, most times of the day, we're cleaning, and we still can't clean it enough. So in this, I just want us to maybe think about that, like how can we also protect when some things are out of our control?
Yeah, we do that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, we know whether it was coming from you or whether it's just gonna, because we know people leave the garbage cans open or ravens get in it, and the next thing you know, it's a whole slew of it blowing through the neighborhood. And what we do also is we all carry trash bags in our vehicles. So we see, we may pass it the first time because we're doing something else, but we may come back and either, you know, we pick it up ourselves tons of times because it's.
But it
How are we
shouldn't
gonna
have
find
to
out?
go to you, Reggie.
Yeah, it shouldn't, but pass it and if we get more, or we pick it up. Or we go to use, well, would you help me? But because it's, how can we prove who's responsible? That's the big issue when it comes to.
The litter, litter is hard. So we might need to look at.
So we pinpoint like the most areas that are most frequent litter, and we get community service workers, you know, that have to do certain many hours. We utilize them for things like that. Again, if it's something that built up quite a bit, we get a phone call, so it has a lot of litter up there, we'll jump into the car with our trash bags and go pick it up. It's a lot easier to do that than to try to figure out who do we hold responsible. You know, no, should we have to do it? No, but do we do it? Of course.
But I think your repeat offenders, you guys know where to go to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we have.
Great, he supports us, he has had multiple conversations, and yeah, it's just a thing, I just want to make sure, right, that our PCO doesn't, we don't want this to be punitive in any way, we want this to be supportive of all community members.
And that was part of our adequate bins and, you know, some of those things, so. Okay.
So could there be an introductory paragraph that talks about like community ethos, that the people across the street from you look at your house, you come out of your door, you look at their house. If you ever wondered why someone has antlers in their yard, go ask them and find out that they collect them and they really think they're cool. You know, that being more of a community and thinking of someone beyond yourself might be a big solution here that might really help. Because as more and more people move in here who have no connection to this place, they don't come with that. And so if we can build on that as a community to encourage, this is a community where we watch out for each other and we don't just think about, I think it could help with this a lot.
Well, and what NAU does when the new students roll in, and when we do the walkabout, knock on all the doors, talk to the new students and introduce themselves and give out a handout how to engage the people home. That's a very effective program. But there could be a preamble statement, but I have hope for humanity, but sometimes I do not. Online, please. Celia?
Yeah, I had tried to suggest something similar to what Duffy was saying, but she was much more eloquent. And so I wholeheartedly endorse the idea of some sort of preamble statement that is about values, that would introduce the reader to what they will then read. And the sort of general thing behind the.
That's what you get.
I'm not. I'm not.
Trying to solve problems.
No, I'll take a shot at that. I think it would go in this, the purpose and intent at the very beginning. Yeah.
One more online. Who? Okay.
Oh, it's Valeria. Duffy, we can talk about, you know, having the community welcome event in, you live in the towns, what's it called, in the townside area?
But it won't help with the Scottsdale people who own the vacation rentals throughout my neighborhood. They're not going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm currently working for this year's event, which we usually go to Plaza Vieja and South Side. But if you think it would be helpful, as Mark suggested, we can talk if you're interested, if you'd like to know more about it.
What's the correct term? I used walkabout, like I was in Australia. What's the correct term for the event?
Oh, community welcome walk.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Reggie, you can talk if you really want to get in trouble.
I was just gonna mention the fact that short-term rentals, so a lot of those Scottsdale or wherever they may be that have a short-term rental. I'm not sure if you're aware, but as of January 1st, 2021, we had developed a short-term rental ordinance, which means not that they can't do it, but it means they have to register with the city so that they provide us with emergency contact information and that type of thing. We're still in the early phases of it, because we've got some software so we can track it so that if there is a problem, we can contact their representative as property manager or the owner directly. And so it's still got a long way to go. There's a ton of them out there that still aren't registered, and we're still working through that process to achieve that, so that any of those types of problems, we'll be able to contact them, and that'll make it a lot easier to make sure they're aware of what we expect of them.
In my observation, the short-term rentals are better cared for than the long-term rentals
Yes.
with
Yes.
non-resident owners.
I agree. But I just wanted you to know there is that in place, and I got a lot. I got a lot on my plate.
What Duffy says, the short-term rentals, they have to make it look attractive.
They do. Yeah,
So they
can
clean them
make
up.
their money.
And that's exactly what you're saying, where you can't see it from my house. A year later, oh yeah, we've got to raise the rent. Maybe we'll put a coat of paint on.
It is amazing. That comment comes up a lot, how differently short-term rentals are managed versus annual rentals and investment in the property. Maybe it's a reflection of the income being drawn out of it. Maybe not. Probably not. The long-term are still paying a lot of rent.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the reviews.
Yeah.
No, it's about trying to, because you're leasing it out, right? It's gotta
The
be.
Well, you
short-term
get to
rentals.
review both ways.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I get to review you as my renter and you get to review me as the owner.
Is the.
And then that's public knowledge. And so,
I have an Airbnb next door to me,
Yeah.
and I've only had one bad experience. And it was the people were upset because Archuletta's ice cream truck was driving up and down the street. I'll never see them again, but I don't care.
Yes.
That was their complaint.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comparison.
Some of these people just have to have
We
something.
must
to
be
get
in
their
the
name out of.
hood.
Something to complain about.
We've covered a lot today. We are getting down to the last minutes. I think one of my big takeaways from today is I feel like we do have a lot of work to do internally to try to condense these topics. I think I'm seeing more overlap than I did see originally. Talking a lot.
But
I think-
that shows you how the property maintenance ordinance does overlap
Yeah.
incredibly.
But even within our list, so like we started with this, our first meeting, we've got it as a handout, right? What are the topics you want covered, right? And so this is up on our site and it's here. I think we can do some more condensing these, I think. But yeah, the other huge task is, how it all works with the rest of our city code. Yeah, we are kind of at the end here. Let's take some wrap-up comments. We're gonna meet again in 2 weeks. We'll just keep until we feel like we're ready, that we've got something that we've presented you with the ordinance that we can take forward.
Evening meeting.
We're gonna have an evening meeting next time. It was supposed to be evening last time, but we had to reschedule, so the idea was we'll get maybe some other participation that way.
Did you change the compliance date?
I did, so yep.
Discussion, so, 'cause obviously I won't be here.
Yep, I updated the schedule and talked about that at the beginning. So the July 28th is we're gonna talk about code compliance and implementation. I like the word implementation too, implementation of the code. Seeking compliance. But so we did make that change. So what about closing comments? Any kind of closing thoughts? Things we didn't get to today that you wanted to talk about?
Just follow the rules.
It's the 3 o'clock.
Let's start with everyone in our Teams meeting. Or anyone out in Teams, that you have any final thoughts or questions or comments?
I learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is, I thought it was really good. The only thing, it was a little hard to hear some of the stuff, so I feel like I got 80% of it and missed 20.
Yeah.
It gets garbled sometimes.
Yeah, we'll keep working on the tech.
Okay, thanks.
I would say it was a good conversation, great engagement. It was like, I had a hard time discerning where, like, when we were talking about like the actual topics for today. And like, you know, it was, which is great because it was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that, Valeria, and everybody. How about here at the Murdoch Center? Any kind of closing comments or thoughts? Go ahead, Jesse.
And this sort of concerns Valeria and Dana, I believe it is, University of
Dana.
Heights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Plaza Vieja and Southside, we do the walk. And Valeria, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how impactful it would be to have something, and they're right next door to NAU too. And so I think maybe something that should be planned, because there's students over there that are impacting their quality of life. So to me, I think that's something that maybe needs to be looked at.
Are you referring to town site? Or
University? U Heights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Narrow.
University Heights, we had a problem house down the street. They moved out at the end of last year, and now that property, I don't know whether somebody bought it or it's a long-term rental, but it's much more stable. So, but all it takes is one party house, and it's tough. You know, and it really, you know, I mean, I know this isn't a topic for today's meeting, but I was trying to get a neighbor of mine to come today, and some of the frustration for people who actually live in their homes is that the resources that some of these other homes have to suck down in terms of police, fire response, code compliance, trash, it's not equitable. And I think a lot of people would like to be able to see, you know, if it's a long-term rental or even a short-term rental, that's a problem, that there's some way of making the financial pain of their decisions or lack of decisions more just to those properties.
Yeah, thank you for that comment.
You're welcome.
This is my first time attending this meeting, but I just want to acknowledge staff and say thank you for trying this again and taking it seriously and listening. It's been a long time coming, and I can tell you're sincere and you're really trying. Excuse me, and I thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Duffy. Anything else, Joe?
I guess this is my first time being able to make this meeting. Yeah, and I guess most of my concerns around this are in the, you know, a lot of this language that allows for it to be more of a homeowners association. And I guess, you know, however we can make sure that it doesn't get too much in that direction. Obviously, vacant buildings to be taken care of, right? But if it's like, well, your grass isn't green or your weeds are a little too high. You know, I bought a house in a neighborhood that doesn't have a homeowner association, and that's sort of like a place, I think a good idea to keep going forward and recognize when we're straying from that.
Yeah.
We do hear that a lot, that people thought specifically that checking on us.
That's why we're trying this new approach, right? It's something a little different. So it doesn't feel like a heavy-handed HOA type PMO. Thank you for all those comments. Anything else, Katie? Last thought? Are we ready to call this one? It's a beautiful summer day.
I have a last comment. There's ways of identifying homes at University Heights, and then just do those homes and those areas. And that is through, gathering reports, for calls, to the police department. So, if that is something that is of interest, we can also explore that.
Yeah, just look at which are real problem properties and a drain on resources.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Good comment, Lydia. Thank you. All right. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. We'll see you next time. Give yourself a hand. Yeah.